Chiyingi Semiano replaced Governor Mubiru. In spite of stepping into big shoes, his experience and training qualified him. He, however, joined the bank when the country was economically strained and the country's exports had declined by 9%, while imports had risen by 20%. This economic strain was further compounded by the global monetary crisis, which saw America's President Nixon de-link the United States dollar from gold. This constrained the bleeding economy further, considering 3 years earlier, Uganda had transferred a sizable percentage of her reserve to the dollar. Making matters worse for Chiyingi's term of office, on the 8th of August 1972, hardly a year into his governorship, President Amin expelled Asians and other foreigners deemed to be exploiting Uganda's economy.
One evening, Amin was in Moroto, and he said he had received a dream that in order to develop Uganda, he must get rid of these people.
Bank of Uganda found itself directly involved in the overwhelming expulsion exercise in order to meet their exit deadline that President Amin had set. Mrs. Janet Kahirimbanyi, who was undergoing internship at the time, came face to face with the consequences.
They were supposed to declare what they have. On their forms, they would declare how much money they have left, put their bank statement if the money was in the bank, and you give out of that, you give them equivalent of 1,000 shillings. Probably the challenge we had was because we had to get many other people from other government departments and ministries to assist us, because you would have a queue lining from the front of the bank down to KPC, or long queues. They were many.
Amin's decree seems to have been a populist move informed by prevailing sentiments from some sections of society.
There were people who were accusing them of they benefiting more than the Ugandans in terms of foreign exchange, and that they were not readily employing Ugandans.
The celebrations were short-lived. People were to soon realize the decree was instead serving to disintegrate the entire economic structure, some effects of which the country still experiences.
The people who were managing production were expelled from the country.
The business community changed overnight from the Asian community to anybody.
Production simply plummeted.
The international isolation of Uganda for an already dislocated economy also hindered Uganda's participation in international markets due to a shortage of required supplies resulting from a lack of foreign exchange.
When he kicked out the Asians, the British were not amused. When he kicked out the Israelis, the boycott came in. We had to pay cash for imports. And that is not good for the economy.
Mrs. Sarah Odong, now retired, was at the time in charge of the visible section of exchange control, and she shares the nightmare the bank experienced managing foreign exchange during those difficult times.
We would have to look at each and every applications to satisfy ourselves that the application number one was genuine and authentic, and also that there was foreign exchange to service that particular application. So the pressure because of that, and a business community which had just come into business overnight without any knowledge of how to run business, was quite a challenge, especially when some of those were not only high-ranking, but sometimes even from the armed forces.
Chiyingi's disapproval of the Asian expulsion and the deficit he inherited amidst continuing challenges did not favor him in the eyes of Amin. He was succeeded by Onegi Obel in August 1973.
Onegi Obel was very tough
on Idi Amin's soldiers, and he would not allow people, soldiers, to walk in the bank and just arrest people like that.
The country had been isolated and therefore had no foreign exchange, limiting the bank's activities to serving as a forex bureau. Everyone from minister to soldiers to government officials were going to the bank in search of foreign exchange.
Certain times it was thought that foreign exchange was an officer at the bank.
I remember when Idi Amin's soldiers were looking for Mr. Foreign Exchange, and they moved to look for they were tired of that man, so they came with guns to the central bank.
And then when the authorities were told, they said, if it's an office, let's dismiss this Mr. Foreign Exchange, who is never at the office.
I think it was one man who said, I think, was it Terete Chikonyoko who said, please, put out, I think, a pound, a note of a pound. I said, this is foreign exchange, is not foreign exchange.
When it was explained that actually foreign exchange was the foreign currency which we used to import goods, they felt that this could be done away with, and we start importing with our Uganda shillings. But simple as that. It's another type of economics.
In 1978, Onegio Bell was replaced by Honorable Henry Kajura.
Initially, he appointed me to be chairman and managing director of Uganda Commercial Bank. And Onegio Bell was appointed governor of the bank. I think Onegio Bell fell ill. So Amin said, well, why don't you go to the central bank? Well, it was very difficult for me to refuse.
Amin is also hailed for being enterprising in the difficult times when the West had isolated Uganda. He befriended Islamic countries who came in handy by providing the much-needed financial support.
I wanted to be very friendly to entire world community.
He went and told the people, particularly the Islamic world, that Uganda was a Muslim country. So some of these grants we're getting, they were just grants, not loans.
The international coffee crisis also helped Uganda earn some income.
That's why I was able to start these big projects, the airline, of the satellite, and so on.
In April 1979, Amin's government was overthrown with the help of Tanzanian forces. The new Uganda National Liberation Front, UNLF government, appointed a new governor, Gideon Nkojo. Nkojo is a Ugandan who had been working for the World Bank in Washington since the 1960s. During his short term in office, Governor Nkojo is mostly credited for wooing back cooperation and partnership of the international community, particularly the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. This is a task he handled excellently given his experience and international networks. The continuous political disruptions made it impossible to realize any plans.
When he found that there was a bit of confusion about the elections during 1980, he thought this was the time for him to leave. So he left. He went back to the World Bank. And then I took over and I was appointed governor after about 2 or 3 months.
At the time of his confirmation, Bank of Uganda was actively engaged in combating the effects of a shattered economy.
We inherited a huge amount of inflation. Prices in 79, 80 had risen by about 200%.
The newly reinstalled UPC government had promised to put the economy back on its feet. Government was so committed to this pursuit that President Obote assumed the office of Minister of Finance, something that had not happened before.
They tried to put that credit together such that it would help the farmer who would not easily access the import market the equipment was here, and he wanted the loan, and they would give him the equipment.
The bank's commitment also made government more cooperative, given that management and staff applied all within their capabilities to revamp the economy. President Obote freed the shilling during the 1981-1982 budget reading on the 1st of June 1981. The decision to free the market was commended locally and internationally. The monetary modifications also brought on board a dual exchange system, which was developed with patriotic sentiments of cushioning some sectors.
The dual exchange rate gave a preferential exchange rate to priority imports like petroleum and government debt. And then all the others, the consumer, were able to import consumer goods at the market-determined rate.
Overall, the country started experiencing progress towards economic recovery.
Because of the standby credits that we got from the IMF, we were able to manage that huge budget deficit during that time. And by about 84, the budget deficit had reduced to about 35% from about 75% of total expenditure.
Now, although during that regime of Obote, the economy was beginning to stabilize. The government of Obote was at the same time facing a war. Here in Buganda, near Kampala, it is not easy, to stabilize an economy when you are facing a war like that one.
The issue of whether Lule was to be president, Benaisa was to be president, Museveni was to be president, who else?
On the 27th of July 1985, President Milton Obote was overthrown by his generals Tito Okello Lutwa and Basilio Okello. In August 1985, Governor Chibirango was summoned to Parliament building to discuss with the general actions he wanted to take, as well as providing him with some information. The issue of currency change was also a key matter.
We knew that it was not justified to change the currency, but I think what they wanted is to get their portrait on the currency notes. We tried to resist that, and we resisted it as much as possible.